podcast. Welcome to Troublemakers.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So Dan, it's great to have you again back at TCDC and in this Samora Michelle studio, and planning all kinds of insurrectionary activities, and it's just great to see you again, comrade.
It's so nice to be here.
So we're here today to talk about action logic.
Yeah.
Which is one of the tools of the Beautiful Trouble toolbox, which I know as a trainer and organizer and activist, you use this toolbox quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us about action logic. What is it?
Action logic is one of my favorite tools and principles. It's one of my favorite theories in the Beautiful Trouble toolkit, which, without sounding cheesy, has informed at least a decade of my life. And I've got so many of the case studies, principles, tactics, strategies, case studies like carved into my head, and go into it like a little treasure chest when we're organizing actions. And action logic is really quite a simple philosophy and super helpful, that the logic of your messaging, of your campaign principles and your demands, why you're doing the protest, needs to be super clear in the instrumentalization, in the picture on the front page of the paper, that the logic of the action has to be forefronted, that people on the tube, whatever, they read the paper and within 3 seconds they know what you're talking about. They know what the action's about. Super helpful, especially if you've got a rampaging ADHD mind like myself.
Yeah.
About keeping things clear and focused.
Yeah. So what would be like the counter example?
Counter examples, I've probably done about 1,000 actions which don't really make much sense. You actually may have been effective, but to the outside world, the public, people reading the papers, they don't know what you're talking about. That doesn't mean it can't be effective. Things which don't create action logic, I believe, are things which aren't instantly clear to the public.
So this could be like, like a march, lots of people with random signs.
Lots of different signs, lots of different banners. Yeah, it could be a lock-on to blockade a business entrance, but everyone's kind of not that streamlined in what they're wearing, or the spokespeople aren't that streamlined in their key messaging. Doesn't mean it's messy. There's beauty in that chaos. But if you want an action to have the theory of action logic, it has to be super clear.
Yeah. Tell us about a time that you and Combabes succeeded in employing good action logic.
There's some recently, actually, which one of my principles in life is to try and do one badass action a year. And a couple of weeks back, we occupied and invaded the Berlinale Film Festival, which is the biggest film festival in Berlin. And this was a Palestinian solidarity-led protest and movement. And we did it. It was a two-pronged action. We got inside with a big banner drop, which is another Beautiful Trouble technique, which said "Lights, Camera, Genocide," which instantly highlighted the fact that there were Israeli film marketeers there who wanted to generate income and wealth for the Israeli film market, which is obviously not in the principles of the boycott, divestment, sanctions movement. And we also did a die-in outside, super clear, lights, camera, genocide, on a banner drop inside. Almost, it was so clear that people who were both selling films, working in the Berlinale, and people who were going to buy films started cheering because it was so clear straight away. And the die-in outside was also really clear. This was inspired by another action logic of one of my favorite movements in the world, ACT UP, AIDS Coalition to Unleash Power, of their 1991 Day of Desperation against the Gulf War, where they did another big banner drop in New York Grand Central Station, which said, "Fight AIDS, not Arabs." So we can see the genealogy of activism, the genealogy of techniques being inspired through the generations. And ACT UP are a very incredible example of intersectionality and framing things in action logic with their silence equals death, action equals life, free Palestine, fight AIDS, not Arabs, fund healthcare, not warfare, both action logic and systems thinking. And
right.
I love
right.
them.
Yeah. So it seems like there's something about the very brief messaging, very clear and brief messaging. That grabs attention, and then also other visuals. What are people doing with their bodies? What kind of colors? Kind of coordination?
Yeah, which is both a blessing and a curse. Is so important to do action logic, to do things which capture the public imagination, and generate mass awareness, potentially funds, and mass solidarity for your cause, is also really infuriating to constantly think in that mindset of like 2-second
sound
bites, which is why I love writing books, because you can go off on a massive tangent, and then hopefully someone will read it. So it's very useful, but don't just have that as your only tool in your life toolkit.
Right. Well, you mentioned books. You're a writer also.
I am.
You recently finished Queer Footprints, which I forgot to bring with me here.
No worries. We'll read it. We'll read it in bed tonight.
Yeah. Well, tell us about the book, first of all, and then I'll get to my question.
Well, both my books, again, are very much inspired and signposts people to Beautiful Trouble, especially the first one, actually. So the first one, United Queerdom, From the Legends of the Gay Liberation Front to the Queers of Tomorrow. And the Beautiful Trouble handbook and online toolkit are so clear with their take-home messaging. You read the synopsis of the either principle, case study, strategy, tactic, and then it summarizes it super clearly, both actually at the beginning and at the end. And at the end of every chapter of United Queerdom, which is basically a genealogy of queer protest movements in the UK, predominantly since the Gay Liberation Front in the 60s. It's also quite autobiographical, so it's movements I've been involved in. But every chapter ends with a take-home of a creative activism. Queer Footprints is much broader and it's, in a sense, much more practical. Whereas the first one, United Queerdom, is, like I say, it's autobiographical, it's polemic. And the second one is a practical walking tour guide to queer radical London with 7 different routes. And then 32, I believe, mini minces, which are short queer power stops. But again, it's all honouring the creative activism of a variety of different queer, intersectional, anti-fascist movements whose shoulders we all stand on in London.
Yeah, so you came across like how many thousand case studies?
2,000.
Yeah.
2,000, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. What James Baldwin says in his kind of guide for writers, which is called Writer's Sentence as Clean as a Bone, which is like basically just kind of give up on your social life because it's not your priority. And that's fine, because I had 2,000 case studies of incredible movements and people who were my like theoretical friends during the writing cave process. So yeah, there was tons of examples of creative activism in there.
Yeah, I mean, just that many thousand examples of, you know, case studies related to queer struggle in London alone, and boiling that down to, you know, 7 neighborhoods and a few other footnotes, you know.
Brutal.
What was, amongst all of that, what was your favorite application of good action logic?
Oh, out of all of them, I would say it's the action that just makes me cry every time I really think about it. Is the die-ins, the ACT UP die-ins. My favourite protest of all time. Is that true? I think it's definitely one of the top 3. I wasn't there. I'm not quite that old. Was the 1992 Ashes action in New York. Of course, I'm going to relate that to London in a second. But the Ashes action was when ACT UP and probably Friends took the ashes of their loved ones to the gates of the White House and threw them over in an act of grief and rage. And the alchemy of grief, what can you do with it? And this was in response to mass government inaction and pharmaceutical greed. And when you see the film United in Ag, which we've still got to watch, Phil, which is co-produced by Sarah Schulman and Jim Hubbard, it's so striking. And it's also what, I don't know if this is in Beautiful Trouble, but what I call the shiver moments of actions which are so deeply emotionally powerful that they give you the shivers. And that's something which you could try and premeditate as you could curate actions. So the Ashes action in New York in 1992, and that inspired similar die-in protests in Trafalgar Square in central London, which happened, I believe, 1992, 1993, 2023. We also did one, or 2022. I don't know. They're all in the book.
What about one of the funniest examples of action logic that you encountered in your research?
For Queer Footprints, got to be the outrage, which was an incredible civil freedoms. What they call them, civil rights, was probably civil rights or freedoms movement in London, which started against police institutional homophobia and police entrapment. They were hilarious, and they did a big wink-in protest at the Statue of Eros in Piccadilly Circus, winking because it's a code. It's a way that you can survive as queer people, to wink at each other. It's like cottaging or cruising, but winking at each other, which the police then preyed upon. So they had a big kind of winking theatrical protest at the Statue of Eros.
The police preyed upon it, meaning like they arrested people who winked, or what?
No, it was a way to evade police by winking at each other. It's almost like a queer code. Just like Polari was the undercover gay subcultural language. And then they had a kiss-in to say, we'll have public displays of affection as queer people. But they also had various like theatrical props. They had a bonkin in a cottage. Someone made a cottage, which is literally small cottages, small little buildings which people cruise in and have sex in. So someone made a like papier-mâché cottage to have a bonkin inside. So there's a few people in a big papier-mâché cottage getting off. And that relates to one of my favourite queer kind of protests of all time, which we use in Queer Tours of London. One of the things that I do at the end of my tours is I stand in a plastic bag and I ask the tourists or people who come on queer tours, why am I standing in a plastic bag? What's this got to do with queer history or queer freedom? And it's because in cottages or toilets, which is where people went to have sex, in order for the police not to see 2 feet underneath the urinal door, one of you stands in a plastic bag or a supermarket bag, so that the police look under there, they think it's you and you're shopping, which is genius. So who knew that supermarket bags or any kind of bags were a tool to our freedom? I love it.
Yeah. Beautiful. So what about the action on your, what is that, your right tricep? Bicep, tricep? Yeah, tell us about that.
So this very much, this is in both books, I believe. United Queerdom and Queer Footprints. Definitely in Queer Footprints is one of the mini-minces at the end. So on my arm, I have a radical nun in drag who's doing a can-can with mice at her feet. And this is in honour to the Gay Liberation Front, the founders of Pride, like radical pride, not corporate pride. And this was, let me get my dates right, it was either 1970 or 1971 or 2. Where's my book? 1970, 71 or 72, when they invaded Methodist Central Hall in Parliament Square to confront what was called the Festival of Light, which was a homophobic religious festival, anti-abortion, anti-queer, anti-feminism. And they dressed it up as nuns to get in the building. And then at a perfect moment, they screamed in protest in the hall and went up on stage, did the can-can in their nun outfits, released mice, everyone evacuated, and they shut down the homophobic Festival of Light. And that was one of the key catalysts for radical pride. The Gay Liberation Front are a constant source of inspiration for me in some, but not always. And my dear friend Andrew Lumsden, who was one of the founders and the first editor of Gay News, which was the first LGBT plus paper since partial decriminalisation, left the building in true Queen style on Halloween last year. And so check Andrew Lumsden's autobiography out in The Guardian to learn more, as well as Queer Footprints.
So tell us about the Royal Shit Tour.
The Royal Take Your Shit Back Tour. That is also an example of action logic. I think that, one of the key things for me with activism in general and with Beautiful Trouble is learning by doing. Because unless there's a miracle and all injustices get overturned by tonight, nothing's going to be perfect. And I really enjoy a culture of compassion and love and reciprocity and supporting each other to learn by doing, rather than some kind of macho, this should be perfect kind of thing. Why am I banging on about that? Because your messaging is constantly a process of tuning up and sharpening so it's as clear as possible. And obviously, when you try and animate the impacts of colonialism over the last 600 years on queer liberation now and healthcare rights, it can be quite confusing. But the Royal Take Your Shit Back Tour is basically building a movement of people affected and in solidarity with queer people who were affected by homophobic legislation, which is perpetuated by colonialism. The root of this is the 1533 Buggery Act of Henry VIII, which was one of the British Empire's most successful exports, which has now resulted in homophobic persecution and criminalisation across the world. There's still, I believe, 69 countries in the world where it's illegal to be queer. 31 or 32 countries in the Commonwealth where it's illegal, all as a direct result of the fucking monarchy and the British Empire. So the Royal Take Your Shit Back tour is people affected by the legislation dumping piles of shit at sites of the British Empire, whether that's literally their embassies or when the royals come and visit and expect everyone to welcome them. No, take your homophobic shit back. We don't want it anymore. And we can see the result of that literally this week in what's happened in Uganda, where they've confirmed the anti-homosexuality bill in Ghana a couple of weeks back. And this is a direct result of the British Empire. But on the flip side, we are winning in some ways. I believe there's 6 Commonwealth countries in the last 3 years which have overturned homophobic legislation. So the Royal Take Your Shit Back tour is the movement to inspire people through creative activism and solidarity to overturn all homophobic legislation through piles of shit.
Beautiful. How can we join?
How can we join? By getting in touch with me on Dan Glass Mincer at Instagram. My website's theglassishalffull.co.uk. We need to create the Take a Raw Shit Back website. At the moment, it's been kind of held by ACT UP, AIDS Coalition to Unleash Power, because in every country where it's illegal to be queer, there's direct impacts on healthcare, and often, more often than not, the rise of HIV, because people are often, it's like coming out twice. So it's been kind of framed within a HIV activist context. But yeah, get in touch with me, but also we need to do some work on social media and but also join ACT UP in wherever city you are.
Yeah, wonderful. And of course, we can also go to theglassishalffull.co.uk to learn about you, the work you're doing, the various groups you're a part of.
Yes.
Friends of the Joiners Arms. You have links to all kinds of radical and revolutionary, exciting things happening, not only in London, not only in Berlin, where you also have your stomping grounds there,
Yeah, and soon to be America, when one of you good listeners offers a hand in marriage so that I can get into the States, because currently I'm banned because of one of my favourite Action Logic actions, which was supergluing the Prime Minister of Britain, the former Prime Minister Gordon Brown, in a climate change protest. And that was actually one of the biggest stories in the world for one day, which resulted in the American authorities not letting me in. Because actually the Action Logic was so successful, I superglued myself to the Prime Minister to say that you can run away from climate change, but you can't run away from my arm. And read a message out, our demands around climate injustice. And that was amazing. But I really want to come to America because for me, it's the Beautiful Trouble Network, AIDS Coalition to Unleash Power, and so many civil rights movements, creative art activism movements, radical academic networks I want to meet and hang out with. But I need to get married or be invited by the UN or something to get in, which I'm going to not give up on that.
Yeah, totally. So if anybody out there can help Dan out and
get married.
Get married to Dan,
I'm quite low maintenance. Yeah, right.
But what would your speed dating profile say?
My speed dating profile would say, actually, I was on Grindr for a bit. And my picture on Grindr was me on the floor by a bin outside of a pub with a kebab on my face. Because I get really, I don't want to personally play the game of I've got the perfect body, because I get attracted. Call me an old soppy, pretentious romantic, but I want to know if you've got a personality. Yes, absolutely. I want a personality as well. So obviously no one's going to come onto me because I'm on the floor with a kebab on my face if they just go for looks. But actually, loads of people got in touch. So yeah, basically what I'm trying to say, you've got to be able to laugh at yourself, can't take yourself too seriously. You've got to religiously love Amy Winehouse. And I used to love hate fucks, which is having sex with the enemy, i.e. the police, the Tories, which are the British Conservative Party, etc. I used to love that. I used to really get off on the role play on that. This is why this interview is 18 plus. But recently I couldn't do that. Fuck the enemy anymore. So yeah, you've got to have good politics. You've got to stand up for justice for everyone. Yeah.
I took us on an exciting little rabbit trail, but just to take us back to the, to the super gluing action. presumably, like, it made top news around the world that day because of the action logic. And I think, I did a little bit of journalism, and it would be so frustrating when there would be some kind of action to cover. You want to write about the topic, right? But people don't really give you any news to tell sometimes.
Yeah.
So if you're not really creating a story with the action, then it makes it quite frustrating, even for like allied journalists, of which there are very few in many parts of the world, to actually write a good story.
Yeah.
So,
you've got to make it
guys
so
super glues
easy.
to, it's a 5-word headline, what you did, and it's very implicit, very obvious.
You have to, you've got to make it. Some of the tricks with why it went viral, not viral then, it was pre-internet? No, it was in 2008, but
sort of feels pre-internet in a way.
You've got to make things super easy for the journalists because they're busy. Like, they read it, they're like, right, I get it straight away. What I call the you did what factor, which is when you're explaining it to a friend, when you're curating the action, that they want to turn to you and be like, you did what? Like, you super glued yourself to the Prime Minister. What? So that's the audacious factor. And obviously you've got to have the picture. And so one of the other award winners in 10 Downing Street, I knew beforehand, and I asked him to take the picture. You weren't actually allowed to bring phones in, but we snuck phones in. And he took the picture because obviously if you don't have the picture, there's no evidence and no one's going to believe you. Another example of action logic, one of my favourites, which has also got the American authorities knickers in a twist, is Baby Trump. Big balloon of Donald Trump. Basically, the objective of that was we wanted him to feel unwelcome to London when he came to visit. And we created a massive Trump balloon, and I was one of the Trump babysitters. And that was our intention, for him to feel unwelcome. And he literally said, I feel unwelcome. We're like, yeah, great, mission accomplished. And because it was so vivid, it was literally a massive balloon of Baby Trump in the heart of democracy.
Brilliant.
Couldn't miss it. And that captured all the attention.
It's kind of trolling him around the world wherever he goes. Send the balloon.
Fun. It was so fun. Yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah. I think we can always end on a note of trolling Trump.
Trolling Trump. We need more of that. Oh God, because what's going to happen in the next 6 months? Quite likely he'll probably get in, and that's devastating. But we've always got beautiful trouble. We've always got solidarity. We've all got a massive toolkit of resistance, and that's what keeps hope alive. Not in the Obama sense of hope, but actual radical, beautiful hope.
Appreciate you, Babe. Thanks a lot for joining me today.
Babe. You too.
Much appreciated.
Was that 45 minutes?
Yeah, no, I think it's not 45 minutes, but
we got it.
You're just so good at this action logic thing. I didn't need to sit around and talk with you.
Yeah,
for
and
4 hours.
I like just chatting. We know, like you said yesterday, we've been around the block. I don't need notes. I don't need notes. Oh, that was great. You sure you got everything?
I hope so. You want to add anything?
No, I just like the 18+ stuff.
Yeah. You want to add any more of that?
No, that is fine for now. We can leave that for a whole.
If the listeners offer popular demand, we'll have you back for the second.
Exactly. Sex and activism. Yeah.